Morning. Fixing to go ahead and do some updates on Ethyl. I know it's been a while since I got on camera and documented any of what's been going on with this truck lately. I didn't mean to get behind, but this time of year is about the best time for me to go ahead and get actual work done, which means if I'm really hustling to go ahead and get things done, I don't go ahead and get video. And I know there's folks that like video better than pictures, so I'm going to go ahead and try and get everybody caught up on this real quick. I've got some plans for today. My biggest is to go ahead and get the interior of the cab, the back wall, the floor, and the firewall coated with Pour 15. I want to go ahead and get that down to ensure we don't have any new rust before I go ahead and put down lizard skin and a few other products to go ahead and help contain heat and noise. In the meanwhile, it's going to be another 100-degree day here in Oklahoma with heat index pushing about 105, 108, somewhere thereabouts. So almost Arizona hot, but just really humid and nasty. Right now it's about perfect. 80s. Unfortunately no breeze, but or very little breeze, but I can work with that. I'm sure it'll pick up later. Anyhow, let me go ahead and get you caught up real quick. One of the big things I went ahead and got done this year was got some new tires for Ethyl and got the hubcaps on. All the tires on her now are 235 85 R16s, and it's a load range E tire. Not that I need the load range, but I do like the tall, thin tire pizza cutters. They kind of help complete the look. This is something that in 1957, when they came out with the Napcos, or in that era when they had the Napcos, it was a tall, thin tire and somewhat aggressive. Not so much for lift. Well, when they were doing it, that was their answer to lift. For me doing it, I'm just trying to go ahead and replicate what they did. The hubcaps are some I found on Marketplace. They are the correct vintage for the truck. However, because I'm using the Dodge factory wheels, I had to think back to my childhood. Dad had gone ahead and bought a 1975 Peugeot diesel for a while to get around the oil embargo, and that car had 13mm nuts that, or excuse me, 13mm bolts that held the hubcaps on. Since there's no retaining clips on these Dodge wheels to go ahead and hold the hubcaps on, I put Dodge center caps on that are retained with the lug nuts, and then I put a stud from the plastic center cap out through the center of the Marketplace hubcaps, and then went ahead and put a nut on the end of it to go ahead and hold these things secure. They sit up snug against the wheel, they don't spin. The nuts are nylock nuts. They've been trimmed off, or excuse me, the stud's been trimmed off to be flush, but they're nylock nuts, so they're not just going to go back off while I'm going down the road. Another thing I did was to go ahead and replace the factory lift blocks on the rear axle with some slightly taller blocks. Hello, Sylvester. These taller blocks are only 2.5 inches taller. I wasn't going to stack them. I did use new hardware with them. I did go ahead and also add an ear on them to go ahead and ensure they don't go ahead and roll out. Excuse me, not roll out so much, but I did add an ear onto these new lift blocks to go ahead and provide a location for the factory bump stops to go ahead and make contact with. So in the event that the truck should ever bottom out, they'll go ahead and bottom out against the bump stops rather than the axle, or excuse me, rather than the frame. Didn't want any damage. Also added to this, I found a factory receiver hitch. I found it on Marketplace. It's off of a wrecked 2001 Cummins diesel. I went ahead and I bought the back half of the frame, and well, actually I was going to buy the whole frame, but when I got over there, number one, my trailer was broke down, so I had to use a smaller trailer and couldn't haul the whole thing. And the seller was agreeable to going ahead and keeping the front half of the frame to go ahead and sell to somebody else. I bought the back half of the frame with another spare tire lift and rear suspension. Although the springs are too wide, I thought I was going to be able to go ahead and use them on Ethyl, but I can't. And the receiver hitch, all for 40 bucks. And I'm going to go ahead and scrap this frame, sell it for the scrap steel, along with a bunch of other junk that I've got needs to go. Ethyl's finally tagged now. I went ahead and got that taken care of in July. Being as how she hadn't been driven on the street since 2002, back in July of that year, I decided not to go ahead and renew the registration and left the truck parked, knowing full well that it was going to be a while before it got back on the road. I didn't feel like paying the $25 a year to go ahead and keep the registration current. As a result, there was a $100 penalty in late fees for the first 2 years, or excuse me, the last 2 years. However, if I went ahead and paid it in July, they only charged me 1 year's penalty because that was the month it was due. So that's been taken care of now. The next thing will be to go ahead and add insurance. And also, as you can see, I went ahead and added tail lights on the back of the truck. The tail lights are just trailer lights for right now. I'll probably go ahead and get something a little bit fancier, but not much. This is pretty similar to what was used in the mid-70s, early 80s square body trucks, step-side trucks. So they'll work. They do exactly what they're supposed to do. I went ahead and got them wired into the factory harness. Well, the factory Dodge harness. That's a whole nother story that we'll get into here in just a moment. I will add that these bulbs that are hanging are for the backup lights. I've not put a fixture on the back end of the truck yet. And the bulbs are still sitting in the factory Dodge sockets. Once I go ahead and figure out what lamp housings I'm going to use, I'll go ahead and trim those sockets off and splice in the wiring to the new housings for the backup lights. Also, it might be apparent to some folks that all of the moss and mildew stains are gone. I went ahead and found that Clorox bathroom cleaner with bleach does a wonderful job of melting the moss. I sprayed some on one afternoon, let it set for a while, and then it dried. I came back, sprayed another coat of it on, and hit it with a red Scotch-Brite pad, and it took the moss right off. It melted like butter. Yeah, the red Scotch-Brite pad's a little bit hard on the paint, but in reality, this white paint is no good. Somebody went ahead and painted over the original turquoise green, and as you can see right here, there's still some left underneath. My plan is to go ahead and go back to the original color. All this white paint's going to go. It's thick, it's chunky, and it's not in very good shape. It's not adhering well in places, and it just really needs to be stripped off and completely redone. I also went ahead and found the chrome headlight trim. This is all nasty and covered with almost 30 years of dirt and filth, and along with the chrome bumper, all of the chrome work, I went ahead and I cleaned it all up with with number 40 steel wool and WD-40, and it went ahead and cleaned up quite nicely. I came back with some chrome wheel polish behind it to go ahead and help keep it clean. There's the Pour 15 warming up to ambient temperature, so I can go ahead and use that here in a little bit. Also got the running boards on. I found that when I went ahead and decided to go ahead and replace the bed floor with steel rather than wood, I didn't take into account the depth of the wood versus the depth of the steel floor, which ended up moving the mounts for the front supports for the steps up about 5/8 of an inch. This meant that when I went ahead and tried to put my steps on, the front supports were about 5/8 of an inch too high. As a result, I went ahead and ended up cutting the support brackets and lowering them down with a plate to bolt in between to make up for that gap and allow me to drop the step down, or the step support down to where it needed to be. I also added a second support underneath the step that goes to the frame. I don't know how visible that is, but let me try and come back from the other side. When I was doing all of this, I coated the bottom side of the steps with Pour 15. Again, I'm trying to go ahead and prevent any additional new rust. The steps were pretty solid. This one's kind of banged up, but it came with the truck when I got it. At least it's not rusted through. But I wanted to make sure we didn't have any rust issues later on. Okay, right now the end cab wiring is still a mess. I'm still working on thinning this down, and that's going to happen here in the near future. In the meantime, I've gone ahead and pulled the interior back out and scrubbed everything down with simple green, and then washed it out once, came back in with jitterbug sander and scuffed everything back up with it was 80 grit on the jitterbug. All the holes in the floor were welded shut, so the only holes I've got now are the holes for the seat. Once the seat mount is once the seats are bolted in, all the holes in the floor will be filled back up, and I can go ahead and bolt down my transmission cover. I'm going to put a seal on that as well. But with scuffing everything up, the Pour 15 should adhere nicely in here, and then should be a nice base coat to go ahead and seal this cab up with the sound deadener and the insulating coats. But that'll be in the future at some point. And speaking of wiring, I went ahead, this little collection of wire right here on top of the dashboard is the brand new, excuse me, no, that's the old headlight switch, the old GM headlight switch. I used that a couple weeks ago to go ahead and troubleshoot the Dodge headlight switch. I was having problems with the Dodge switch. Everything's wired in, spliced into the Dodge harness to go ahead and run my headlights, my parking lights, turn signals, brake lights. Turn signals and brake lights were working, however the headlights and the parking lights weren't. And I couldn't figure out why specifically. I tried playing with the multimeter and a test lamp, and after about a day of plugging and probing and tinkering around, I figured out that the factory Dodge headlight switch was bad, not my wiring. And I used the GM headlight switch to go ahead and jump from the plug on the Dodge wire harness to the GM switch, and was able to figure out that my wiring for the lamps was good. The problem was, in fact, the Dodge headlight switch. I've since got a new Dodge headlight switch. I go ahead and pull that on, and either the parking lights come on or the headlights come on, or both. Well, let me say that correctly. When you go ahead and pull the switch all the way out, the headlights and parking lights come on like they're supposed to. Also, the dimmer switch on the steering column, the Dodge dimmer switch, actually works like it's supposed to, so I have high and low. The plan is that next month I'm going to go ahead and take Ethyl down to the Brickfest car show in Pauls Valley. I'm not really a car show guy, but this will be kind of fun. It'll be something different to do, and Brickfest is close by, so I can go ahead and take her down there. After I go ahead and put the Pour 15 down in the cab today, I'm going to go ahead and work on trying to get the seats cleaned up a little bit. I'm not putting my good seats in right now because the door seals aren't done yet. I don't want weather getting in here and destroying the good seats that I do have. They don't need to be refinished or anything. They're rather comfortable, so I'm trying to preserve those. In the meanwhile, I've got some Jeep Cherokee seats from a two-door Cherokee that fit in here nicely, and they'll go ahead and do the job. They're comfortable to sit in, and they fit the truck rather well, so they'll work. And one last update. None of this is in order, by the way. This has just been how I've been trying to go ahead and get it done for you this morning. So here we go. I decided that it was a better idea to get rid of the copper and brass manual transmission style radiator and replace it with an aluminum radiator that's got a built-in transmission cooler. This went ahead and got rid of the Cummins style water to oil cooler that I had mounted up under the front bumper. It goes ahead and works essentially the same with the auxiliary cooler that I have. However, I have no worries about my water pump going ahead circulating water adequately to go ahead and keep the transmission cool. I also went ahead and added in a overflow bottle right here. A little bit fancy for Ethyl, but you know, every once in a while you gotta go ahead and treat them right. In addition to the aluminum radiator, I went ahead and added in a proper electric fan. This is a 2-speed electric fan off of the Ford Taurus, 95 Ford Taurus station wagon, 3.8 V6, for those that really want to know. You Jeep guys that do rock crawling and stuff like that, this is the one that everybody wants to use. Low speed is like, I think 2,500 CFM, 2,200 CFM, something like that. High speed pulls over 4,000 CFM. This will keep the truck cool. No two ways about it. Right now I've got it wired in low speed only. I'm not hooked up for air conditioning yet, so I haven't set up that feature. However, even at low speed, I can actually go ahead and feel air being pulled through the front of the transmission cooler. I can hold my hand out in front of the cooler about an inch or so and feel the air being pulled in and through. So with that going on, I know I'm getting good airflow through here, and I've had no heating issues whatsoever. So one more good thing that has taken place. Anyway, I've got to go ahead and wrap this up and start getting my paint down. And I'll show you the finished results here later. Thank you for watching. Joe's got to go back to work.